Hey, I'm Jusko from ProbableMoney.com, and in this video we are going to look at the American Express Platinum Card approval odds. What are your chances of being approved at different credit scores and different credit histories? Before we do it, I'm going to ask you to please subscribe to this YouTube channel if you have not already. And if you have already, I thank you for doing so. So if you are thinking about getting the American Express Platinum Card, you may be wondering what your chances are of being approved. Maybe you don't want to get a hard inquiry on your credit report only to be denied. So in this video, we are going to look at what your chances are at different levels, who is almost always going to be approved, who is almost never going to be approved, and then of course that big gray area, which there's a pretty good chance you are sitting in or you wouldn't be necessarily watching a video like this. Now, some people would tell you that because the American Express Platinum Card has a very high annual fee, they will just take anyone because they want people to pay that annual fee. But the fact of the matter is, if they take someone and they're willing to pay that big annual fee, but they get a big bonus up front and then they default on the card, a year later or less, well, then even getting the big annual fee from that card holder is not good for American Express. So it's certainly not true that just anyone can be approved, although it probably is easier to be approved now than it used to be. All right, so let's start first by talking about who is almost always going to get approved. If your credit score is over 700, if you have 2 years of credit history, your own credit card, not just an authorized user on somebody else's, if you have income that American Express feels is decent enough, I would say probably at least $30,000 a year is probably a good place that I would say is the bare minimum that they would look at. Well, then you have a pretty good shot at being approved. Now, if you have, just recently gotten a car loan and it is very big and you're just starting to pay it off, so you have a big car payment or maybe you have big student loan payments, that kind of stuff, those things could hurt you if they are looking at your debt to income ratio. But overall, for most people, if you've got that 700 credit score, you got 2 years of credit history that is your own credit history and you don't have any derogatories, you've made all your payments on time and they feel like your income is good enough, well, then you're probably going to get approved. Would I put a number on that? I don't know, probably anywhere from 75% to 90% of people are going to be approved with those numbers. Again, there are always things like if you've gotten a lot of credit cards in the past or whatever else American Express might see that as a red flag that could hurt you, but most people are going to get approved with those numbers. Now, if you have that 700 credit score or more, but your credit history is less than 2 years old, you haven't had your own credit card for 2 years, or you don't have other loan repayments of at least 2 years for American Express to take a look at, well, then you start to fall into a gray area. Obviously, the closer you are to having 2 years of credit history, the better. Again, if you're an authorized user on somebody else's card, that kind of helps you establish your credit history and establish a credit score, but it's not going to factor in too much to American Express in terms of whether that, increases your chances of approval. They're going to want to see your own work with your own credit card. Income is going to matter here. The lower your income, obviously, the less likely they are to approve you if you don't have that much credit history. If your income is, $75,000 or more, you are going to have a much better chance even with less credit history as long as you don't have anything bad on your credit report. Now, American Express does have a pre-qualification tool on their website. You can use that to see what they tell you you will probably be approved for. So if the American Express Platinum comes up there, well, then you probably would get approved for it. Sometimes on the pre-qualification tool, they might tell you that you are likely to be approved, but you might see an offer that is a little worse than what is on their public site, especially in terms of the potential bonus for new card holders. So you can use that pre-approval tool to get an idea, and maybe you'll want to go through with it if you want the Platinum card, but don't be surprised if that bonus is a little less. Now, if your credit score is between 650 and 700, this is going to be the biggest gray area in terms of approval on the American Express Platinum, but many people do get approved here. It is just going to depend on a lot of the same factors that we already talked about. Do you have at least a couple years of credit history under your belt? Do you have a history where there aren't any derogatories, maybe a late payment here or there, but more in the past, maybe 2 years or more in the past since you've had any late payments? Have you ever done anything where you've dinged American Express in particular, not just with late payments, but especially if you haven't paid off an account, they are not going to let you in for a long time. So that is a place where in some ways you could say If you've burned American Express, you're out. But if you haven't hurt yourself or anyone else too bad in the last couple of years, that is going to help you. Income, again, going to come into play. At least $30,000 per year, I would say, at a minimum to get in with this card. The more you make, the better your chances are. Obviously, American Express wants you to actually put some charges on this card, so they are going to feel better about you if you have more income. And then you get into other things like, well, what are your debts compared to that income? So if you have high debt in comparison to how much you make, obviously that's something that doesn't look as good either. So if you have a very expensive car or you have huge student loans or whatever your monthly nut is in terms of what you have to pay for your car, for your home, student loans, anything like that, that is going to come into play. But if you have some credit history, there's nothing bad in the last couple of years, your debt's not too bad, you haven't gotten a ton of new credit cards over the last 6 months to a year, well then your chances are still pretty decent with the American Express Platinum. Now, less than 2 years of credit history, if you're between 650 and 700, not so good anymore, because there probably is something on your credit report that is not great. Maybe you've had a late payment somewhere in there that has kept your score down a little bit, and because you don't have that much credit history, it has sort of weighed on your credit score and it hasn't allowed you to get to a higher level. So in there, that's where you're going to have a harder time if you are between 650 and 700, especially if you are closer to 650. And again, use that American Express pre-qualification tool if you are between 650 and 700 and you are worried about your approval chances. If you do it and the Platinum card shows up, well then there's a pretty good chance that you are going to get approved. If it does not show up, well then there's a pretty good chance you would not get approved. So that's obviously something that would help you. If you have any experience with American Express in the past, you already have one of their cards, well then your chances also are going to go up in this area. Plus, you will probably not get a hard inquiry on your American Express Platinum application, because once American Express knows that you have one of their cards, they start to look at your history with them, not just your history overall, and oftentimes it is just a soft pull on the American Express Platinum, meaning it would not hurt your credit score even if you are denied. So that is something to keep in mind as well. And before we talk about those people with credit scores below 650, I also want to talk about income for a second. When you get into a place where you're in the gray area, whether that's 650 to 700 or maybe 700 with less credit history, the chances are going to go up that American Express is going to ask for income verification. So they're going to want to see something to show that you actually make what you say you make. So if you are someone that thinks, well, I can just put anything I want to in the income because they're not going to check, well, I can tell you that they probably will check if you are on the bubble. So if you're tempted at all to do this, which you should not be, but if you are tempted to do it, don't be surprised if you are asked for income verification, which obviously would torpedo your application if you have not told the truth. Now, if your credit score is under 650, then your chances of being approved for the American Express Platinum card are going to go down, and they're going to go down quickly the further you are from 650. But some people do still get approved in this area. If you are 625 or below, I would say your chances are almost zero of being approved. But if you're between 626 and 649, some people might get approved, but you are going to need to have kind of everything right. If your credit score has been trending up, and that's how you are in that area between 626 and 649. That could help you if your income is high, if you're making $75,000 or more a year. That's sort of a gray area, a squishy number there, 75,000, but I just wanted to show that you'd have to have some significant income probably for American Express to consider taking you on there. If you have any experience with American Express, that is good. If you already have one of their credit cards and they can see how you've done with them, that is very helpful to you. And then again, if you don't have high debt in relation to your income, if you haven't gotten a bunch of new credit cards in the past, if you have sort of the perfect storm of all of those things, you maybe could get approved in that 625 or 626 to 649 range. So that pretty much covers all the ranges. Like I said at the beginning, American Express is not just going to take on anyone just because their card has a high annual fee, but it has gotten easier to get the American Express Platinum card, and maybe because there are now more competitors out there of travel cards that have a little higher annual fees and have a lot of perks and all that kind of stuff, they have had to be a little more competitive competitive in terms of who they are willing to take on. But again, if your income is lower, if you don't have much credit history, if you don't seem like someone that American Express says, well, this person's going to put a lot on the card and we don't think they're going to default on this card, well, then your chances wouldn't be as good. But if your credit scores are a little bit lower, but you're looking good in terms of income and you haven't done anything too bad in the recent past, and especially if you haven't hurt American Express, well, then your chances are going to be better. If you got questions, comments, or anything to say about your own experience with the American Express Platinum application process, what credit score you had, how much credit history you had, all of that good stuff, would love to hear it in that comment section below. Otherwise, I thank you for watching, and as always, please go to proudmoney.com, where we do credit card reviews, we talk personal finance, we talk deals, and all sorts of other fun stuff too. If you are not going to leave a comment, you're not going to go to the website, you probably want to watch this video.